In this week's video, I'm capturing the Milky Way at the sunrise area of Mount Rainier National Park. I've always dreamed of getting a shot here with some beautiful wildflowers in the foreground, the mountain in the background, and then the Milky Way sky over it all. I will show you how I put the pieces together to create this image. It results from a stacked series of photos taken of the flowers in the foreground, another exposure of the grass in the midground, another series of exposures of the mountain and the trees in the background, and then lastly the sky. I'll show you how I captured all of these and how those resulting pieces fit together to make the final piece. Hey photography friends, Annette Stiers-Jones here. In this week's video, I'm doing some Milky Way photography, and I'm currently at the sunrise area of Mount Rainier National Park, and we've got some really beautiful conditions to take some Milky Way photos. It's nice and clear. I'm going to have clear skies and really be able to see the Milky Way super well, especially with the new moon. So we're going to have really good clarity on the Milky Way itself and not have that blown out by the light of the moon. And we should see the Milky Way appear behind the mountain around 2:30, right in the saddle there. One thing that's really great about the sunrise location is that we have the mountain to our southwest, and that's where the Milky Way is going to be. It's going to move in from the east and slowly make its way west, going behind the mountain as the night progresses. So we came up here a bit before sunset just to kind of scope out some places for a composition. I'm really looking to get some wildflowers in the foreground because we do have wildflowers blooming up here this time of the season. And it's just easier to look around when you've got a bit of daylight to do that. And found a nice clump here right along the edge of the trail. So my goal is to put that in the foreground of the composition and then have the mountain here and the Milky Way in the background. Finding the perfect patch of flowers really was quite difficult. It looks like there's tons of flowers here when you look out into the meadow, but when you limit yourself, as you should, to just the flowers on the edge of the trail, this does reduce your number of possibilities quite a bit. And the flowers at this time of year were unfortunately a little past peak, so finding those really pristine flowers was a little bit of a challenge. Despite all that, with persistence, I was able to find a great patch of pasque flowers right by the edge of the trail. So this is a test shot of the composition I'm going for. And I've got these flowers in the foreground, some trees in the midground, the mountain in the background, and eventually the Milky Way. And I think this would look really nice. And I've always wanted to get a Milky Way photo like this, but I do have a bit of a difficulty to deal with. And that is that these flowers here are just ever so subtly blowing in the breeze. So I need to figure out what I'm going to do about that. I may need to try a different composition or maybe try to artificially light these with a short exposure. I really wanted this composition with the flowers in the foreground, so I told myself I was going to wait there for at least an hour to see if the wind would calm down a bit to have any hope of making this shot. And I did have plenty of time to wait for that, considering the Milky Way would not arrive until 2:30 a.m. So I sat watching these flowers dance around in the wind, in the cold for quite a bit. And while I was waiting, this strange insect started crawling on the flowers. And I thought at this point, okay, this must be a sign. This composition is just not meant for me. Maybe I should really just hang it up and go home right now and stop freezing in the dark. But luckily, eventually, the bug fell off of his own accord, and the wind did stop blowing. So I was able to put a shot together after all. So I still have a little time before the Milky Way aligns. to shoot my sky images. And I thought in the meantime, I'd do a few more foreground shots just to show how I did that. So right now I have my headlamp pointed right at those flowers, and that's going to help me bring those into focus. And earlier I found that I actually had to stop down uh, quite a bit on my f-stop to about f11 to really get this front flower and then also the back flower in focus at the same time. I'm just so close to those that I really need a narrow f-stop for that. And I'm going to do manual focus. So I have to change quite a bit from what my focus was for the sky and the mountains. So this looks pretty good at the moment. Might be a little soft on this front one. Turn up my light a little bit to see it a little better. There we go. Okay. Now, try to dial that in a little better. And let's check the other ones, make sure they still look good. Okay, those still look good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do about a 30-second exposure, and I'm going to do some light painting as part of that so I can actually get some luminance to these flowers, because otherwise it is just way too pitch black out here to do anything else. So I'll start my exposure, and then I'll start light painting. Okay. And so I'll just kind of show what I'm doing, kind of moving my light around the flowers. I'm trying to prevent there from being any strong shadows in one particular direction. And there we go. Let's see how that turned out. Well, that was a bit too much light painting, so I'll try to dial it down a bit for the next one and see if we can get that a little better. Okay, so that second try is looking quite a bit better. Got our flowers looking nice and in focus, and luckily that wind stopped blowing, so I'm able to do some longer exposures. And that longer exposure in combination with light painting, I'm able to get these flowers for the foreground. So what I will do is I will blend these with the shots of the mountain and the shots of the sky later on in Photoshop. Okay, so now I'm going to be shooting my foreground, specifically the mountain part of the foreground. So what I did was I've got my camera in manual focus, and I'm trying to find the bright stars and just get them to the point where they're as small as they can be. And that's a pretty good start to get some focus for the mountain, which is also going to be really far away. So I've got it set up in bulb mode. I'm going to be taking an exposure for probably about 4 minutes at ISO 400 at f2.8. That's wide open for my lens, trying to get as much light in as possible. So I'll take an exposure, see how it looks, and then I'll adjust my focus as needed to get the mountain in focus. Okay, I've got my first exposure of the mountain, and you can see the stars are trailing because this was a 4-minute exposure, so that's gonna happen. We'll get the sky exposure later, but this is what the mountain looks like. It really doesn't look too bad for focus. So I think what I might do is take a few more shots here so that I can stack them later in Photoshop to help bring down some of the noise. So this is a shot I took of the mountain, the foreground, at about 5 meters on my focus, and it's a little soft. So I think I'm going to make an adjustment and try to get that a little bit more sharp. So I'll come back to my viewfinder here. I've got manual focus. I'll just touch the focus ring slightly, and I'm going to take that more to like an 8 and take another shot for 4 minutes and see how that looks. But the basic idea is to iterate with the focus and move it a little bit in a direction, keeping in mind where you were for each shot, and then gradually get to the place where you have the focus you would like for the mountain. Okay, so this is my foreground shot of the mountain with the focus at about 8 meters, and this really looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. So I think I'm going to take a few additional 4-minute exposures here. What I like to do is stack them in Photoshop. You stack them all in a smart object and then stack in median mode, and it will take out a lot of the noise that you can see in these night sky images. Just because there's limited light, there's going to be a lot of noise, and that really helps to bring some of that down. So this is my second exposure for the mountain part of the foreground. So you can see I've got nice sharp focus on the mountain and on the trees here in the background, but definitely the flowers are out of focus. So at this aperture, I'm at wide open to get as much light as I can. I just don't really have very much depth of field, especially with things that are very close to the lens. So that's why I took separate exposures, focusing just on the flowers, and then I will focus stack those later in post-processing. So now I'm just waiting for my foreground exposures to complete. They're about 4 minutes each. So I'll probably do, I don't know, 3 or 4. And basically, I'm just collecting all those foreground shots while I'm waiting for the Milky Way to reach the alignment point. So I've been out here since blue hour, so just a little after sunset, around 9:30 p.m. And the alignment of the Milky Way, where it is in that saddle between Little Tahoma and Mount Rainier, that's at about 2:30 a.m. So I have a while to sit here and wait for that alignment to happen. So I might just spend the time to mention a few other settings that are really going to be helpful in setting up your Milky Way photography for success. One thing that is easy to overlook is if you have long exposure noise reduction on your camera, you'll want to turn that off, especially if you're taking these long 3 or 4 minute foreground exposures. What it will do is once you complete your exposure, it will take another 3 to 4 minute exposure of just dark to try to factor out the noise. And so your 4-minute exposure turns into 8 minutes. So just turn that off. There's all kinds of ways that you can handle noise besides that. Another thing that is going to be very helpful, of course, is you want to have manual focus. You're going to be needing to use your manual focus ring to focus in on the stars and all the elements of your foreground. Automatic focus is just not going to work with the amount of light that we have out here at night. Another thing that helps is to turn down your monitor brightness. It's nice while you're out here to really preserve your night vision. So lowering your monitor brightness down is going to be helpful to you and also any other photographers that are around you. Lucky for me, there's not anybody else up at this particular point, so I don't have to worry too much about my headlamp interfering with any of their shots. So that's something to always keep in mind too. If you have a headlamp with a red light mode, that's a great thing to have because that helps preserve your night vision and is a little less intrusive to any other photographers who are in the area where you're shooting. Okay, so at this point, I've got my foreground shots completed, so I thought I'd spend a little bit of time just talking about the different gear that I have in my setup. So I have my Sony A7R5 mirrorless camera, and I have a wide angle lens here. It's a 16 to 35 millimeter f2.8. I'd love to get a faster lens someday, like maybe a 1.8 or a 1.4. But for now, this has worked out pretty good for me. And, it's great to have the wide angle lens for these Milky Way compositions so you can get all of the landscape and all of the Milky Way in one shot together. I, of course, have a tripod. This tripod is actually brand new. I've usually had a tripod with a center stalk, but this tripod does not have a center stalk. And why I like that is because it allows you to really get just right down low on top of the flowers. Um, Whereas before with the center stalk, I was pretty limited by the height of the center stalk itself on how low to the ground I could get. But I've got a lot more flexibility with this Benro here. And you might notice all of this contraption here in the center. This is a tracker system. So what this does is it will actually move the camera with a small motor, and you align the system with the North Star, and it will rotate the camera such that it follows the Milky Way. So that's something fairly new that I'm trying out. Usually, the way I like to do my shots without a tracker is to take multiple short exposures of 10 seconds and then stack those to reduce the noise. And then with that method, you don't need a tracking system. But with a tracker, you can do it all in one shot. You can leave the shutter open for basically 2 minutes, and this motor will follow along with the Milky Way so you don't get the trailing in the stars, even though you've got such a long exposure. So I'm going to try both ways tonight, but in this video, I'll be focusing on the old school method, the stacking with 10 to 15 short exposures of about 10 seconds each, because that's what I'm most familiar with and most comfortable explaining how to do at this point. But I definitely want to compare the results that I get from both methods and see if I do see an improvement with a tracker. Another thing I'll point out is I have a shutter release here, shutter release, remote release. So what this will allow me to do is for those 4-minute foreground shots, I'm able to do a long exposure in bulb mode. You really do need a remote release in order to use bulb mode. Um, Another tip, if you're using bulb mode, you want to make sure that you don't have the silent shooting function on your camera, because then you cannot use bulb mode. So just to watch out there. But yeah, so that's the gear that I have. I do also have, I brought with me a banded lens heater to try to keep condensation off the lens. I know we're supposed to be above the dew point today, so I don't have it on. But that's something to think about if you are in an area that has a lot of humidity and if you're going to be close to the dew point wherever you're shooting. Okay, so we are getting closer to when the Milky Way will be in the right position. I already took a few test shots. Now it's a little hard to see here, but you can kind of see it there over to the left side of Little Tahoma. Um, but I'll show you how I have my camera set up to capture these shots of the sky. So I've got my shutter speed to about 10 seconds. The idea is to keep it short enough that you don't get trailing in your stars, and the exact amount is going to depend on your lens and your camera and the focal length that you choose. But the best way is to just take a test shot and really look at the corners of your image and see if those stars are close enough to spot stars for your liking. You can also check out photo pills. They have a calculator that will tell you for your lens and focal length what is the longest speed you can have to get spot stars. But usually I feel like I can be a little more lenient, a little bit longer shutter speed, and let a little bit more light in. I have my aperture wide open for me at f2.8. If you've got a faster lens, you can certainly make use of that. And I've got my ISO at 6400. So as long as you're in that neighborhood, that's just fine. Um, One thing I often forget to set my white balance. So I have my white balance set to 4000K. You can always adjust your white balance in processing, but it's just nice to set it up here and always have that consistent so you keep your editing workflow consistent. And the next important thing is that I have this set up in interval shooting mode. So for me, I'll go over here and try to find my menu key. There's menu, interval shooting. So I have interval shooting on. I'll have it on a 2-second delay. I make the interval 1 second longer than my shutter speed. So I've got 11 seconds. So a 1 second gap between the 10-second shots. And then I'm going to have it do 15. Really, if you're in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 exposures, that's going to be enough to stack in a software like Sequitur or Starry Landscape Stacker, and that will take out the noise that you get in your image. So I've got all that set up. And, one thing I'll mention that's, really helpful for shooting out in the dark like this is getting really familiar with your camera and knowing where all those buttons are so you can kind of feel exactly where they're going to be in the dark. And even after practice, it's hard sometimes. But like there, I remembered how I get to my review for the photos. And yeah, it just helps quite a bit to have that in mind and be able to just feel where the buttons are rather than need to turn your headlamp on all the time. So I did end up needing to get out my lens heater, and I don't have to use this very often. I gotta say, this is one of the coldest Milky Way shoots I've ever done, but I've got it connected here to an external battery via cord. So I'm hoping to keep some of that condensation off the lens by keeping it warm. So this is first time I'm using this particular lens heater, so we'll see how it works. Okay, so I've taken my stack of 10-second exposures of the sky. So I'll just zoom in to kind of see how these look. And yeah, I think they're looking pretty good. Nice little point stars. We definitely have some noise there, but that's why we take 15 replicas, is so we can stack them. So I'll just go up to the corners, and you can kind of see as you get to the corners of the image, you start to see a little more of that trailing start to happen. But this is super zoomed in. So for me, I prefer to kind of be here in this range where I get just a tiny bit, but you zoom out and it looks just fine. And I think that's a better balance for managing the noise and trying to get more light in, because once you get down to 8-second exposures, especially with a f2.8, it's just pretty low light, and it's hard to work with that. So I might take a few more of my 10-second exposures just to have some in a different position, and then after that I'll move on to taking some longer exposures with my tracker system. I stayed for a bit more to utilize the tracker system to take images of the sky and compare that to my usual method of stacking shorter 10-second images. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out very well with the tracker. To use the tracker, you have to align the laser pointer with the North Star, and I had a bank of trees behind me blocking the view of the North Star just a little bit. Resultantly, my images with the tracker had a bit of trailing in the corners. So I think it's a great idea to have this tool of stacking shorter 10-second images in your toolbox for instances like these where it's difficult to get alignment. But I was really happy with the image I did get with my usual method of stacking 10 to 15 images of 10-second exposures. Let's see how it turned out. Here's the final image with all of the pieces put together. My flower exposure is a single shot taken at 38 seconds with light painting. At f11, I was able to get all 4 flowers in focus. However, for the grass just behind the flowers, I had to take another exposure and move my focus point to get the grass in focus in that area. Next, I took my mountain exposures. I did a stack of 4, each of them 4 minutes long. And finally, my sky image was a stack of 10 exposures. Each image was 10 seconds, shot at f2.8. All of these images were shot at 18 millimeters at the same camera position. I made initial edits in Lightroom. I stacked the sky images in Sequator, and then I brought all the pieces together in Photoshop. Thanks for joining me for this week's video, shooting the Milky Way in Mount Rainier National Park. If you'd like to see more content like this, please be sure to like and subscribe. If you'd like to see how I edited this photo, please drop a comment below and be sure to sign up for my email subscription list. The link is in the description for the video. Thanks for watching.